Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, please remain upstanding for the National Superintendent Tamba and the Gambia Police Band. Ladies and gentlemen, please rise for the national anthem of the Republic of the Gambia. Please be seated. We're a prayerful nation, and therefore we begin all ceremonies with prayer. So we'd like to ask you, ladies and gentlemen, if we can all pray in our individual ways. Amen. Amen. Your Excellency, President of the Republic of the Gambia, honorable ministers, honorable governors, delegates, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to welcome you to my country, the Gambia, the #1 in Africa. We may be the smallest country in mainland Africa, but we produce a lot of greats. You will remember Kunta Kinte, the man who gave a meaning to resistance. You may remember our contribution to football in the person of Biri Biri, who made his way to Savella's Hall of Fame. The Gambia is no short of greats. In music, we contributed Jaliba Kuyate, the king of Kora. As if one wasn't enough, we produced the first female master of the 21-string instrument in the person of Sona Jobate. In the Gambia, we don't just preserve history, we reinvent it. Sona is the first in the world to play the kora globally. But you may come to Gambia for our culture, but our magic will make you stay. You want to have conversations in the River Gambia with the hippos, you're welcome. We also encourage you to have chats with our friendly crocodiles of Kachikali. Excellencies, honorable ministers, governors, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, there is no better time to host the 2026 African Caucus in Banjul, the Gambia, to discuss the transforming Africa's economies through investment, innovation, and inclusion. As the world is faced with economic uncertainty, tightening financial conditions, and significant structural shifts, increasing pressure on African economies' fiscal space, growth, and resilience. At the same time, Africa's demographic dynamism, deepening regional integration, natural resource endowments, and rapid technological change present vast opportunities to advance economic transformation. Against this backdrop, ladies and gentlemen, in the coming 3 days, the African governors will engage in forward-looking discussions on strategies to unlock the continent's potential by addressing persistent financial gaps, maintain good governance, strengthening domestic capacities, and accelerating structural transformation across priority sectors. The discussions here in Banjul will be conducted under two sub-themes, namely, unlocking financing to drive Africa's structural transformation and leveraging Africa's natural resource endowments for quality jobs and inclusive growth. The objective is to consider how engagement with the Bretton Woods institutions can be strengthened to support these priorities in a more coherent, responsive, and well-sequenced manner. Therefore, ladies and gentlemen, it gives me great pleasure to invite a man who is no stranger to finance and economic affairs across Africa, the man who happened to be our Honorable Minister for Finance and Economic Affairs, the Honorable C.D. Keita.
Your Excellency, President Adama Barrow, President of the Republic of the Gambia, Your Excellency, Prime Minister of the Republic of Guinea-Bissau, Vice Chairperson and Ambassador Selma Al-Hadidi of the African Union, deputizing for the AU Chairman, Your Excellency, President Sidi Ultah, President of the African Development Bank, Your Excellency, President Aliou Touré, President of ECOWAS, Vice President of Western Central Africa of the World Bank Group, Brother Usman Jagana, Honorable Ministers present, Honorable colleague ministers and fellow governors and alternate governors of the IMF and the World Bank, representatives of the multilateral and development financial institutions, executive directors of the African Development Bank, IMF, and the World Bank Group, Secretary of the IMF, delegates from the private sector across the African continent, senior government officials, staff of the IMF and the World Bank Group, distinguished guests, members of the Fourth Estate, the media, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the government and the people of the Gambia, I extend our warmest greetings to each of you and thank you for joining us at this important gathering, that is the 2026 African Caucus. It is with immense pleasure that I welcome you to the 2026 session of the African Caucus here in Banjul, the Gambia, otherwise called the Smiling Coast of Africa. I express our sincere appreciation to each of you for your presence and your continued commitment to advancing Africa's development agenda. Hosting this distinguished assembly of African ministers and governors on our shores is both a privilege and a historic moment for the Gambia. We trust that Banjul will provide not only a venue for meaningful dialogue, but also a space for renewed collaboration and shared purpose. The hosting of the 2026 African Caucus in Banjul, once again, is a testimony to the confidence and belief my fellow governors have in the peace, security, and improved economic development of the Gambia under the able leadership of His Excellency President Adama Barrow. The President has implemented bold and significant reforms that have transformed the Gambia in all sectors of our economic and social life. The number one pillar of the reforms has been the domestic resource mobilization, where our tax revenue increased from 11 billion in 2022 to 25 billion in 2025, without increasing the tax rate, but only through digitalization and enhanced compliance. The economy grew at 6% in 2025, and inflation, despite the global pressures, is at 7.5%. We have also now cleared all areas of government financial statements and began reporting financial statements to the National Assembly within 6 months as per the requirements of the Constitution for the first time in the history of the Gambia. Electricity access across the country is at an all-time high of 90%, and we are on course to meet universal access before the end of 2026. Infrastructure, which tops the President's priority, has witnessed significant turnaround, with more than 1,200 kilometers of road constructed under His Excellency's leadership, and a third of these were funded from domestic resources. While these achievements have been supported by the development partners, the single defining aspect thereof is the unwavering commitment and leadership drive of President Barrow to transform the Gambia. This year's theme, Transforming Africa's Economies Through Investment, Innovation, and Inclusion, reflects both the urgency of our current challenges and the promise of Africa's future. It is more than a statement of intent, it is a call to action. We meet at a time of significant global uncertainties, marked by tighter financial conditions, rising debt pressures, and mounting external shocks that weigh heavily on our economies. Yet, even in the face of these challenges, Africa stands at the threshold of extraordinary possibilities. Africa, our continent, is defined by our energy, creativity, and ambition, and a commitment and a continent with the youngest population in the world, expanding digital frontiers, strengthening regional integration, and abundant natural wealth waiting to be transformed into shared prosperity. Fellow ministers and governors, Your Excellencies, the question before us is not whether Africa can rise, but how fast and how inclusively and how sustainably we can achieve that transformation. Over the course of this caucus, our mission is clear: to identify ways to move decisively from potential to performance, from promise to progress. Our deliberations will focus on two critical and mutually reinforcing priorities, two powerful pillars of transformation. One, unlocking the financing of Africa's future. We must mobilize resources needed to power our ambitions by strengthening domestic revenue systems, deepening our capital markets, and ensuring that businesses, especially our small and medium-sized enterprises, have the financing they need to grow, innovate, create jobs, and boost growth. Second, leveraging on our natural resources for inclusive growth. Africa's resources must become engines of opportunity through value addition, industrialization, and strategic investment in energy, infrastructure, and digital transformation, while creating jobs for our growing young population. This is how we build economies that are not only resource-rich, but also value-rich, job-rich, and future-ready. This is how we move from resource dependence to value creation, from vulnerability to resilience, and from fragmentation to integration. And the theme is consistent with the policies and reforms program of His Excellency President Barrow. We believe it is working for the Gambia, and therefore it can work for Africa. Excellencies, at the heart of our discussion lies a fundamental objective: to strengthen our partnership with the IMF and the World Bank Group in ways that aligns with Africa's priorities and aspirations. Africa's voice must continue to be clear, united, and forward-looking. In our memorandum to the leadership of the Bretton Woods institutions, we will continue advocating for engagement that is responsive to our realities, coordinated across institutions, and effective in delivering results on the ground. Our collective strength lies in our unity of purpose and in our ability to speak with one voice about what Africa needs to thrive and what is essential to ensure that the global financial architecture aligns with Africa's development trajectory. Your Excellencies and distinguished participants, this caucus is more than a forum for discussion. It is a platform for decisive leadership. During these 3 days, let us ensure that our conversations translate into tangible outcomes, policies that restore fiscal space, investment that unlock growth, and reforms that create opportunity for millions across Africa. Let us ensure that our deliberations culminate in a strong and unified Banjul Declaration reflecting Africa's collective voice and priorities. Africa's future will be defined not by circumstances, but by the choices, collaboration, and determination to act. Together, we can build economies that are stronger, greener, and more inclusive, and better prepared for the challenges and opportunities of tomorrow. Let this caucus mark a turning point where our ambitions meet decisive actions, where partnerships deliver meaningful results, and where Africa moves forward with renewed confidence and unity. With the right policies, partnerships, and commitment, we can turn today's challenges into tomorrow's opportunities. I therefore encourage all of us to actively contribute to these discussions, guided by a shared sense of purpose and determination. I thank you all, and I wish us all productive and inspiring and fruitful deliberations. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Keita. The next speaker joined the World Bank in 2004. He has held several leadership positions, including Vice President for Human Resource and Country Director for multiple countries across West Africa, where he led operations in both stable and fragile contexts. In recognition of his leadership, he received the World Bank Group Staff Association Good Manager Award in 2009. Is the World Bank's current Regional Vice President for West and Central Africa, overseeing partnerships with 22 countries and a portfolio of more than $58 billion in financing, projects, and technical assistance. The next speaker, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Usman Jagana.
Your Excellency President Adama Barrow, Your Excellency Prime Minister of Guinea-Bissau, Your Excellency Selma Malika Haddadi, Deputy Chairperson of the African Union Commission, my brother Dr. Sidi Ulta, President of the African Development Bank, Honorable Sidi Keita, Chairperson of the African Caucus, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, all protocol observed. On behalf of Ajay Banga, President of the World Bank Group, let me start by thanking the government and the people of the Gambia under the leadership of President Adama Barrow for the warm welcome. The Gambia's own journey from a difficult past toward a more open, reforming state is a reminder that the occasion before us in these 3 days actually are lived by the countries represented in this room. I also would like to thank the governors and the executive director for the great partnership with the World Bank Group and for the co-creation that they have put on the table that now lead all our deliberation. We are meeting at a moment that is possibly one of the most consequential. We are indeed meeting at a time of successive and at time overlapping crisis for our continent and actually for the world. Yes, the continent faces significant risks. Under the theme of investment, innovation, and inclusion, this offers unique opportunity actually to identify what we can do together and what we need to do together to create more opportunity for the continent. And those three words, investment, innovation, and inclusion, converge on a single purpose: jobs, more jobs, and better jobs. The demographic reality, and this has been mentioned just by my brother Sidi Keita, facing this continent is not new to anyone here, but it's worth restating plainly. 90% of the growth in the world working age population between 2030 and 2050 will occur in Africa. Sub-Saharan Africa working age population alone will grow by more than 620 million people by mid-century. The fundamental questions, therefore, before us is whether our economies will have built the firms and industries capable of absorbing those numbers into productive work. The picture today is sobering. 9 in 10 jobs on the continent are created by the private sector, not by government. Yet, nearly 3/4 of employment remain in low productivity, own account, or family enterprises. Our task, hence, is about creating jobs, and I'm repeating this for the second time because it's essential. It's an existing question and challenge that need to be addressed. And this is why the World Bank Group has organized its work around what we call the 3x5 approach: 3 foundational pillars and 5 sectors: energy, agribusiness, manufacturing, healthcare, and tourism, where jobs can be created at scale. The first pillar is about investment. Investment indeed is foundational. It's about infrastructure and human capital. Energy through Mission 300, water through Water Forward, in connectivity through regional corridors, and in agriculture where 2/3 of the continent job already sit. The second pillar is innovation. It's about building a business-enabling environment and deepening the value chain and the regional integration that African Continental Free Trade Area make possible. Private capital represents the third pillar, and mobilizing at scale private capital that will allow actually more private sector investment in order to create even more jobs. Running through all 3 pillars is a commitment to inclusion, ensuring that the benefit of growth reaches the young people, the women, and the region that have historically been left behind. That is what true transformation requires. As the World Bank Group, we are working to be a better partner in this effort. We have shortened project preparation times, moved decision-making closer to the countries we serve, and really doubled our financing to the region over the past decade. Excellency, the World Bank Group come to this caucus not to prescribe, but to listen and to support your efforts to turn investment, innovation, and inclusion into jobs for African people. We look forward to the discussion ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jagana. We The speeches are being translated live. Channel 1 is English, Channel 2 French, 3 Arabic, and 4 Portuguese. You may follow the speeches if you do not speak English. I had tasked myself for the next 12 months to speak French, but definitely Arabic will not be one of them. I'm not sure about Portuguese. But the next caucus, please challenge me to speak in French, and I will endeavor to do that. The next speaker is a former Director General for Africa at Algeria's Ministry of Foreign Affairs and has held ambassadorial posts in Kenya and South Sudan, as well as senior diplomatic roles with the African Union and the United Nations in Geneva. A lawyer, she holds a master's degree in international law and private law from the University of Nice. And she's currently the deputy chairperson of the African Union Commission, a career diplomat, a legal expert, and currently serving as ambassador of Algeria to Ethiopia and a permanent representative to the African Union and the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa. Ladies and gentlemen, Her Excellency Salma Malika Haddadi.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على نبيه الصادق الأمين. Your Excellency, President Adama Barrow, President of the Republic of the Gambia. Your Excellency, Prime Minister of the Republic of Guinea-Bissau. Your Excellency, Dr. Sidi Ould Tah, President of the African Development Bank Group. Your Excellency, Aliou Touré, President of ECOWAS. Your Excellency, Honorable Sidi Keita, Minister of Finance of the Republic of the Gambia and Chair of the 2026 African Caucus. Honorable Ministers of Finance, Honorable Governors of Central Banks, Mr. Ousmane Dianga, Vice President for the Western and Central Africa of the World Bank, Executive Directors before the World Bank, representatives of the international and diplomatic community, captains of industry and private sectors leaders, ladies and gentlemen, all protocols duly observed. It is a great honor to address the African Caucus meeting in the beautiful city of Banjul at a time of profound consequence for our continent and for the global economy. At the outset, I wish to express my sincere appreciation to the government and people of the Gambia for their warm hospitality and for the excellent arrangements made for this important gathering. I would like to also extend deep appreciation to the executive directors of the World Bank Group and the International Monetary Fund, and for their teams for convening this strategic meeting and for continuing to provide a platform for African priorities in global economic discussions while associating the African Union to this very important conversation. To all, I would like to bring the warm greetings of the African Union family and the best wishes of success from His Excellency Mahmoud Ali Yusuf, the chairperson of the African Union Commission. Excellencies, this meeting must be more than a ceremonial opening. It must be understood for what it truly is: a high-level strategic dialogue among Africa's economic leadership on the future terms of Africa's engagement with global finance, investment, and development. And I would like to pause here to really appreciate the comment that were made by the Vice President of the World Bank when he said that he is here to listen. This issue before us is not simply how Africa can attract more capital, The deeper question is this: under what framework will Africa's development be financed, by whom, at what cost, under which conditions, and to what end? For too long, Africa has been assessed through an outdated investment lens, one shaped by excessive risk perception, short-termism, fragmented country-by-country or sub-region analysis, and models that were not designed for the scale, demographic dynamism, and structural transformation now underway across our continent. That old framework no longer fits the Africa of today, and it certainly does not fit the Africa of tomorrow. Africa is not a peripheral story to the world economy. Africa is one of the central stories of the 21st century. Our continent is undergoing organic growth driven by urbanization, entrepreneurship, technological adaptation, continental markets integration, and the energy and ambition of one of the youngest populations in the world. It appears that the global and financial architecture that assesses Africa fails to view this dynamism at its real value. This mismatch must now be confronted directly. We meet in a global context shaped by rising tariffs, geopolitical tensions, trade fragmentation, climate shocks, tighter financial conditions, and debt vulnerabilities across many developing economies. But these pressures also carry an important lesson. Africa must strengthen its resilience by building from within, through deeper regional integration, stronger domestic markets, productive investment, and African-led innovation. This vision is fully aligned with Agenda 2063, the Africa we want, an integrated, prosperous, and peaceful Africa driven by its own citizens and representing a dynamic force in the global arena. Excellencies, Africa's development conversation must now move decisively from resource extraction to value creation, from external dependency to investable sovereignty, and from being seen as a high-risk destination to being recognized as a high-potential growth frontier. Let us consider the contradiction before us. Africa continues to attract global attention as the continent of the future. We are home to critical minerals required for the green transition. We possess vast agricultural potential. We are building the world's largest free trade area in the developing world through the AfCFTA. We are experiencing rapid digital adoption. We have a youthful population that will shape the global labor force for decades to come. Yet, Africa continues to face disproportionately high-risk premiums, high borrowing costs, and persistent investment in the sectors that matter for the transformation, all due to what we view as unfair credit rating. This is not merely a market inefficiency. It is a structural problem. When Africa is priced through outdated assumptions rather than present realities and future fundamentals, the result is predictable. Capital becomes too expensive, long-term investment is discouraged, productive sectors remain underfinanced, and the continent's transformation is delayed. We cannot afford that. This is why Africa's call today is not simply for more investments. It is for fair investment logic. It is for a financing framework that recognizes Africa's long-term fundamentals, the scale of its internal market, the momentum of its innovation ecosystem, and the reality that our growth will increasingly be driven by domestic demand, regional trade, and African enterprise. Excellencies, distinguished guests, this is also why Africa Caucus precisely matters. This forum brings together African governance of the IMF and the World Bank Group, finance ministers, central economic policymakers, and leading private sector voices. It is therefore one of the few spaces where Africa can speak, not in fragments, but with strategic coherence. Our message to the international financial institution and the global capital markets should be clear. Africa does not seek to be managed as a permanent risk. Africa seeks to be engaged as a strategic investment partner. To do that, we must focus on 4 interlinked imperatives, and this is the contribution of the African Union Commission to this conversation. First, Africa must shift the narrative from capital scarcity to investability. Investment flows remain below what the continent's fundamentals justify. Although foreign direct investment rebounded in 2024, capital remains concentrated in a few markets, sectors, and short-term opportunities, while insufficient financing reaches manufacturing, agribusiness, logistics, clean energy, healthcare, digital infrastructure, and regional value chains. The challenge is therefore not only the volume of investment, but its quality, composition, and impact. Africa needs long-term capital that builds productive capacity, lowers the cost of doing business, strengthens regional value chains, and creates jobs at scale. This requires stronger partnerships among African governments, financial institutions, private investors, and international financial institutions to improve project preparations, de-risk viable sectors, deepen local capital markets, and build pipelines of bankable opportunities. Africa must be recognized not as a speculative market, but as a long-term global growth proposition. Second, Africa must challenge the persistence of unfair risk perception and the so-called African premium. The issue of sovereign rating, risk assessment, and premium pricing is not abstract. It has direct consequences for fiscal space, debt sustainability, infrastructure financing, and private sector growth. When African countries pay more than peers with similar fundamentals, the continent is not merely being judged conservatively, it is being structurally disadvantaged. That is why the African Union supports for reform of the global credit rating practices and the establishment of an African-led solution, such as the African Credit Rating Agency, which is not symbolic, it is strategic. We need a system that reflects context, recognizes reform, captures resilience, and properly values long-term development trajectories. Capital must price Africa on evidence, not inertia. Third, Africa must align investment with its development ambitions and the needs of its growing youth population. Millions of young Africans enter the labor market each year, yet job creation is not keeping pace. Financing must therefore support the enterprises that create employment, SMEs, manufacturers, agro-processors, creative industries, technology businesses, women-led enterprises, and startups solving practical problems across our continent. Africa's future will be built not only by large corporations, but also in workshops, industrial parks, digital platforms, and small businesses growing into continental champions. If we believe in youth, our capital must reflect that belief. If jobs matter, we must finance jobs creators. We must also equip young people with the skills required by Africa's economic vision and the jobs of the future. Too often, our policies celebrate youth and innovation, while our financial systems leave SMEs and startups unfunded, over-collateralized, and priced out of capital. This contradiction must end. Africa needs financing models that reflect how its innovation actually develops, organically, digitally, and by solving real local challenges. These enterprises must now be supported to grow at scale. Fourth and last, Africa must move from fragmented markets to continental scale. No credible investment strategy for Africa can ignore the African continental free trade area. That is, the fact that AfCFTA is more than a trade agreement. It is the foundation for integrated markets, regional value chains, and expansion of African enterprise beyond national borders. For investors, scale matters. Larger markets reduce risk, strengthen demands, improve bankability, and lower transaction costs. But integration must be supported by infrastructure, transport corridors, ports, railways, power pools, digital networks, cross-border payments, and efficient trade systems. With these foundations, Africa is no longer 55 fragmented markets, but one of the world's most compelling long-term investment opportunities. Excellencies, let me also underscore the central role of private capital and African business leadership. Africa's transformation will ultimately be delivered through investment enterprise growth and confidence in the continent's future. Our billionaires, pension and sovereign wealth funds, banks, institutional investors, and industrial leaders must be active partners in building Africa's next growth phase. We must mobilize African savings for African infrastructure, strengthen African private equity and venture capital, and connect policy ambition with investable projects. But we also must create the enabling conditions to do so. On the other hand, international financial institutions must go beyond traditional lending by expanding guarantees, risk-sharing instruments, local currency financing, and other mechanisms that crowd in productive private capital. Excellencies, let me conclude by saying that Africa's future cannot be built on outdated models imported from elsewhere. It requires frameworks that reflect the continent's own realities: dynamic markets, rapid technology adoption, growing cities, regional integration, and youth-led enterprise. Finance must now catch up with this reality. This caucus should therefore send a clear and unified message. One, that Africa must be assessed through a future-facing investment framework. Two, unfair risk premiums and outdated perception must be corrected. Three, SMEs, startups, and innovation ecosystems must be placed at the center of financing strategies. Four, youth employment must become a key measure of successful economic partnership. And five, Africa's integration agenda must be recognized as a major investment opportunity. The 2026 memorandum to the international financial institutions must therefore be ambitious, strategic, and unified. Let this caucus define a new consensus. That is, Africa needs a new investment compact, fairer risk assessment, stronger financing for African enterprise, and a firm commitment to its young people as the builders of the continent's next economic era. Africa is not waiting for a future to be given to it. Africa is already building that future. Our responsibility is to ensure that global finance, private investment, and public policy are aligned with that reality. If we succeed, investment, innovation, and inclusion will become more than conference themes. They will become the foundation of Africa's transformation. I thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you very much. Talking about investment, we have GAIPA, Investment Promotion Agency of the Gambia, exhibiting for small, medium enterprises in thematic 1, which is right outside the hall at the end of the hall to your right, and thematic 2, where conversations about investment potentials in the Gambia will be discussed with interested parties. If you could kindly go there during any of these breaks to buy products that are made in the Gambia, exclusively made in the Gambia, but also have conversations around investment potentials of the Gambia. The next speaker brings over 40 years of experience in banking and economics. A public servant, previously he served as the president of the Arab Bank for Economic Development in Africa, BADIER, from 2015 to 2025, where he led a major institutional transformation, securing top-tier international credit ratings, nearly doubling the bank's assets, and significantly strengthening its financial performances and asset quality. He is the current president of the African Development Bank Group and was elected the 9th president of the African Development Bank Group in May of 2025, receiving over 76% of shareholder votes and the highest first-time margin in the bank's history. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, please clap for His Excellency Dr. Sidi Ulta as he comes to deliver us the keynote address.
Your Excellency, Mr. Adama Barrow, President of the Republic of the Gambia. Excellency, Mr. Prime Minister of Guinea-Bissau. Your Excellency is member of the government of the Gambia. Your Excellency, Ambassador Selma Malika Haddadi, Deputy Chairperson of the African Union Commission. His Excellency, Aliou Touré, Chairperson of the ECOWAS Commission. Honorable Sidi Keita, Minister of Finance and Economic Affairs and Governor for the Gambia at the African Development Bank Group, Chair of the African Caucus 2026. Honorable Governors of the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank. My dear brother Osman Jagana, Regional Vice President of Western and Central African State at the World Bank. Executive Directors of the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank. Excellencies, member of the Diplomatic Corps and representative of Pan-African and international organizations based in the Gambia, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. It is an honor to join you here in Banjul for the African Caucus 2026, a privileged forum for dialogue between Africa and the multilateral financial system. Allow me first to congratulate His Excellency President Adama Barrow for gracing this event and to pay tribute to the impressive reform journey undertaken by the Gambia in recent years. Under your leadership, Mr. President, the country has consolidated macroeconomic stability, strengthened public sector governance, modernized procurement system, enhanced oversight of state-owned enterprises, and achieved commendable progress in domestic resource mobilization through innovative digital reforms. The resilience of the Gambian economy reflected in strong growth, improved fiscal performance, and sustained efforts to build institutional capacity stands as a testament to your government's commitment to inclusive and sustainable development. Allow me also, Mr. President, to thank the Gambia for its early pledge to the African Development Fund 17th replenishment, the largest replenishment in the fund history, with African countries contributing from 4 countries to 25 countries. The Gambia demonstrated leadership early in the process, and its timely pledge helped to build momentum. With this replenishment, African countries are no longer beneficiaries only, but are shareholders and co-investors in the continent's future. I also thank our Gambian hosts for their warm welcome and commend Honorable Minister Sidi Keita for the excellent preparation of the caucus. I want also to appreciate the work of the executive directors representing Africa at the boards of the World Bank and International Monetary Funds. Your Excellency, Mr. President, honorable governors and ministers, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. For decades, the world looked to Asia as the principal engine of global growth. Today, Africa is increasingly emerging as the new growth frontier. According to IMF projection, Africa is expected to remain one of the world's fastest growing regions, with 12 African economies ranking among the top 20 fastest global growing economies. African economies have shown real resilience, yet face major headwinds, tighter financing, shrinking aid, geopolitical tensions, climate change. To respond with clarity, we must first name 4 paradoxes that define Africa's position in the world economy. The first is the paradox of size without influence. 18% of the world population, more than 30% of its mineral reserves, more than 60% of its uncultivated arable land, yet barely 3% of the global trade and the world GDP. The second paradox is the paradox of financing. Africa has a financing gap of 400 billion every year for its transformation, while more than 4 trillion sits in our banks, pension funds, insurance and reinsurance activities, and sovereign wealth funds. The third paradox is the paradox of opportunity. Africa offers some of the world's most attractive investment: energy, infrastructure, agriculture, critical mineral, but remains one of the most underinvested regions, receiving only 6% of global FDIs. The main reason is a perceived risk. Moreover, Africa guarantee gap is estimated at around 50 billion US dollars. Investors are not short of appetite. They are short of instruments that make Africa's risk bankable. The fourth paradox is a paradox of fragmentation. A market of 1.4 billion people and 2.5 billion by 2050, with a current GDP of 3 trillion, yet intra-African trade is just 16%, against nearly 60% in Asia and 70% in Europe. The African Continental Free Trade Agreement is our decisive answer. Naming this paradox is not enough. The 4 cardinal points, the strategic vision endorsed by the governor of the African Development Bank in Brazzaville in May, answer each of them directly. To the paradox of financing, the response is mobilizing capital at scale. We are unlocking Africa's own savings while crowding in global capital. The role of the multilateral development banks and the African development banks in particular can't close the 400 billion gap. Our role is to leverage, de-risk, and crowding so every dollar of our balance sheet mobilizes many dollars. To the fragmentation behind it, our answer is reforming and consolidating Africa's financial institution. Our financial ecosystem is itself fragmented. More than 100 national and regional development finance institutions in Africa, whose combined weight is barely 1% of the world DFI's balance sheet. The new African financial architecture, born of the Abidjan Consensus, is our answer to the fragmentation. We should consolidate, connect all these institutions. This ecosystem should work on the 4 principles of NAFAD, namely subsidiarity, complementarity, coordination, and jobs for our youth and for our men. And we need to support our micro, small, and medium enterprise, which represent more than 90% of the economic fabric of the continent. Finally, to the paradox of opportunity, our answer is building resilient infrastructure and accelerating value addition. Today, Africa exports its wealth raw and imports it back refined. Transforming African raw materials on African soil is how we stitch the continental market together and make the AfCFTA deliver. 4 paradoxes, 4 cardinal points, 1 direction. An Africa that finances itself, connects itself, and negotiates with the world with 1 voice. Here in Banjul, the proof is before our eyes. The Senegambia Bridge binds our market into a shared destiny. It is also an asset whose value has been recycled, attracting institutional investors, freeing public capital for the next bridge, the next corridor, the next power station, the next power line. Your Excellency President, honorable governors and ministers, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, allow me to close with 4 messages. My first message is to the African governments. You have met successive crises with remarkable effort on domestic resource mobilization and debt management. We commend the Borrowers Club championed by South Africa, which is carrying Africa's case to the global fora. To bridge the guarantee gap, Africa needs to have a strong Pan-African mechanism. In this regard, the transformation of ATD, Africa Trade, Investment, Development Insurance, into a continental agency appears as the most practical solution. Hence, the African Development Bank Group has increased its participation in the capital of ATD 5 times, becoming its largest shareholder. We call upon the 24 African shareholders to increase their participation in the capital of ATD and invite the remaining 30 countries to join. My second message is to the International Monetary Fund. We deeply appreciate your support for reforms in Africa. But 3 successive crises, COVID-19, Ukraine, and the current crisis in the Middle East, have created an exceptional situation and have eroded the buffers constituted by countries. And to exceptional situation, there is a need for exceptional solutions. So we call the IMF for more flexibility, fresh concessional resources, and further channeling of special drawing rights to African countries to preserve the peace and stability. Let us never forget the price of peace and stability. IMF research shows that every dollar invested in conflict prevention can save up to $103 in future costs. Prevention is not charity. It is the most profitable investment the international community can make. My third message to the World Bank Group. We value the indispensable role of IDA and commend Ajay Banga's reforms. We welcome the establishment of full mutual reliance between our two institutions. I salute in particular IFC under the leadership of our brother Makhtar Job. Africa values joint investment and joint initiative, such as M300, AgriConnect, and Water Forward. We count on the World Bank Group to support the recapitalization of ATD and the strengthening of its insurance operation. My fourth message and the last message to all our partners. Africa seeks partnership anchored in trade and investment, not just aid. And Africa invites you to work with African institutions. Africa now needs accelerated execution and confidence in its own capacities. We will deliver the 4 cardinal points with speed in results, scale in resources, synergy among government partners and the private sector, and shared prosperity so growth reaches every African woman, man, and young person. Many of you are governors of all 3 institutions, IMF, World Bank, African Development Bank. So we all have a special responsibility to advance a common African voice and a financial architecture that reflects the realities and potential of our continent. Africa has the resources. Africa has the institutions. Africa has the people. What we need now is a collective will to act with speed, at scale, in synergy for shared prosperity. Thank you, Your Excellency President Barrow, Honorable Governor, distinguished guests. I wish you fruitful deliberation and thank our Gambian hosts once again for their generous welcome to Banjul. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. We are progressing so fast. I was going to talk about one debate that has really engulfed West Africa for a long time. And the debate is about food. Every West African country claims to own one dish. We went to a contest. We did one in Ghana. We beat them. We did a second one in Nigeria. We beat them. Gambia is the #1 for jollof rice. So if you are from anywhere else in Africa and you have never tried jollof rice, please, in the coming 3 days, try it. You will discover culinary delight you've never experienced before. Ask the Sierra Leoneans, they will tell you, Gambia makes the best jollof. Ask Nigeria, they will vote for us. Ask Ghana, they will vote for us. So during the preparations on Saturday, I had a lady, I am not going to name her, told me, you know who makes the best jollof rice? I said, tell me. I'm used to people saying Nigeria, Ghana, Sierra Leone, Senegal. But Senegal and Gambia were the same. The person told me Côte d'Ivoire. I said, what? Côte d'Ivoire? Jollof rice, Côte d'Ivoire? I did not hear that conversation. Are they part of this discussion? Côte d'Ivoire? Abidjan of all places. Please, stay out of our jollof. And we want to give you a bit of experience of the Gambia with a song called Mansaya by Jalinaya and Mbemba Saho. And it will be just about 3 minutes, then we'll go into others. We just want you to experience our country for what it is. Jalinaya and Mbemba.
Yeah. Mansaya alala tila ikana sile jigo sembe alala tila kana sile jigo sembe alala tila ni alaye ni bo mansaya la dunya kona yesu abirila ayeso imane fa warawka wale diandinge adama baro adama baro dunya mume bitilla baro mandasi sorpresa le bakari baji